Well, for those of you who are of that age, getting ready to think about retiring, uh, I'm pretty sure that most people, including myself for the most part, uh, one of their first considerations is, do I have enough money to retire? How do my finances look? But believe it or not, I don't think that's the most important thing. I think that you'll find the most important thing is something entirely different. And let me tell you why. So if you're like me, you've probably worked all your life. I've worked since I was probably 15 years old, maybe even before. I mean, if you want to count mowing lawns and working in people's yards, it would have been like 12. But as far as putting into, say, Social Security, the government's retirement plan, uh, I guess we would say we started at 16, most of us, officially anyway, unless you had a letter from your parents and you could start at 15, which I did. But we've been working all of our lives. If you're in the same boat as I am, in fact, I'm here, I started this channel because I took the deferred resignation. I was in the military. I did 22 years in the Army. And so I also have a military retirement. So it's something I can fall back on. Now, don't get me wrong, military retirement is not that great, especially if you retired enlisted. I retired as an E7 enlisted, so, the money was, it's sufficient, let's just say. And it helps that, in one sense, it helps that I have a medical disability, but on the other hand, that medical disability is not there for no reason. It's there because I've had a lot of injuries while I was in the military. So all that I'm saying because after I retired from the military, I also went back to work for the U.S. government, working as a Department of the Army civilian. So when it comes to retirement finances, even though I don't have much, my retirement finances are pretty steady. So that's something that I don't particularly worry about that much. Sure, is there going to be less in retirement? Yes. And that scares a lot of people. It scared me too. But also you have to consider, what are your expenses going to be in retirement? Now, this is really about a reason that's greater than finances, but I just want to make this point that my particular case is I do have some retirement saved up. And so there's a lot of people that may not. One of the biggest financial responsibilities in retirement is health insurance or health care. Of course, yeah, sure, life insurance is great, but let's be honest. In the grand scheme of things, when you die, it doesn't much matter, how prepared you were for it. Now, it's going to affect your family, but it doesn't affect you. So, but healthcare is, long-term healthcare can be really expensive if you need it. So, for that reason, and my own personal situation, I will say that money is not the number one, in my opinion. The number one reason why you would consider retiring and the most important thing in retirement is your health. That outweighs everything else because without health, you got no money. You got nothing else. You've got no means of making money. If you've been in the military, number one, you don't like to be living on the government dole, even though you've done it all your life. I know I did, and I'm grateful for it. But that's just something to consider. Now, let me discuss this further on my walk. As you can see, I'm sitting in front of a small lake right now, and I decided I'd sit down for a moment. But let's go for a walk, and I'll talk more about this. Well, it's a good day for a walk. It's been nice out here. We haven't had rain in a few days. But let's get right down to business and talk about what it is that I'm here for. This is why I believe that health and health concerns outweigh financial concerns in retirement. And so for those of you who are thinking about this heavily, I was there. I'll admit I spent, I was very concerned about the financial side of this, but what really got me to the decision to accept this deferred retirement program in the short amount of time that we had to think about it and go ahead and do this retirement, not much, but a little bit earlier than planned, It was a disruption. What was health? It was a health concern. Let me go back and start from the beginning. And I have to go way back for this. So let's go back and talk about this and why health was so important to me. And that is because, of course, in 22 years in the military, and even before that, I've always been healthy. I ran cross country in high school. So I was fairly active, and I was always very skinny. So, they make that clear right off the bat. I was never some big old muscle bound person, but I was very physically fit and active. Well, then I got into a point where I was 18 years old. I was a man now. I was striking out on my own. Nobody could tell me anything. And the next thing I know, I have been kicked out of or evicted from my apartment because of some party that I threw. And I'm now living in my car. So, of course, I'm looking to get out of town and get as far away as possible. So, what do? Well, I go in the military. So it was a good option at the time. Well, when I went in the military, of course, I did my first tour in Germany. Left Germany, went to Fort Campbell, and I got into a specialized unit. I knew someone who knew someone. My first tour in Germany was an Aero Scout Observer. So, I spent a lot of time on an OH-58. In that couple of years in Germany, I was in a helicopter crash, and I also had an immersion heater blow up in my face. So, in those particular times, hey, you got back on the wagon. When I had the immersion heater incident, I had to go back to the rear to be patched up. They sent me back out to the field again. And then a week later, when our field exercise was over with, I got back in the helicopter and we flew back. But I was brand new to the unit at that time. So, I got all the crappy details and stuff. That's how I got the explosion. And that caused nerve damage in my left eye. So from that point on, I had nerve damage that made it difficult for me to adjust to night vision, even though it didn't seem like that big of a deal at the time. You'll find that later on I spent a lot of time under night vision goggles, but at that time it was a big deal. And so recovered from that, and also had broke my tailbone on a field exercise. Recovered from that, still had to fly home with the broken tailbone. It was quite painful. My platoon sergeant told me I had hemorrhoids, which turned out to not be the case. Recovered from that. Let me see, was in the helicopter crash. After that, got sent to the hospital, came out, recovered, was back in the air, flying the aircraft in just a couple of days. So the pattern that I'm trying to develop here is throughout my whole entire military career, it was a matter of you went into the hospital when you had to because you went in on a gurney, unless it was for a flight physical, because then you got to have blood work done and do all that flight physical stuff. But I got used to the fact that I did not go to the hospital unless I absolutely had to. Health was not my major concern. I was healthy. Of course, I went into a special operations unit. It now has become the 160th. Back then it was still called the 160th, but we were completely unknown at that time. So it was brand new. We were the only unit. We didn't have battalions at that time. And I'll just say in that time, we did some things. I was hospitalized once or twice while in that unit. And so, again, recovered, no big deal. So the pattern that I'm trying to develop here is the fact that all throughout my military career, for the next 20 years or so, after I met my wife, the whole, right down the line, I got used to only going to the hospital when I had to. So, of course, then I retire, and that same attitude prevails. And the next thing you know, I'm now 57 years old, and I started having some medical issues that I could not figure out what they were. So it got to the point where I almost couldn't function anymore. So I had to go to the hospital. I had to make an appointment. So made an appointment, saw the doctor, and lo and behold, I had diabetes so bad that my A1C numbers did not show on their chart. Their chart only went up to 12, I think. And so it was whatever it was beyond that. It was really bad. They put me on insulin. And so this was not one of those things where I could just go in and be fixed, and come back out and recover. This was something that was going to affect me for the rest of my life. So from that point on, I now am living with this, I don't know what you'd call it, this dark cloud over my head of, yep, I have this ailment that I can't fix. There's nothing I can do about it. I got to live with it. And also, from that moment on, I realized that my healthy lifespan was now 0 because I didn't, I no longer have a healthy lifespan. That was a big, that was a hard pill to swallow for me. But then I quickly realized that, I don't know, I can't find any evidence that this is something that runs in the family or is hereditary. But I will say that after the fact, I realized my grandfather was diagnosed with diabetes in his, I think, 60s. And he died at 73 from complications associated with diabetes and lupus. So that should have been a clue right there. But, my father and my grandfather were also both alcoholics, and they both smoked. So I thought, okay, I got this beat because I don't really drink, I don't really smoke. Later on, when my father died of a stroke, and because he died alone from that stroke, they had to do an autopsy. And they realized in the autopsy that he was diabetic as well. And they were thinking there's a possibility that that's what caused the stroke. So that was point number 2. I should have realized that, I should be looking out for myself. But I didn't. At that point in time, I was preparing myself. I was already retired from the military. And I had already been a Department of the Army civilian for a few years. But I had been given an offer to work for a contractor to go back into Iraq and train Iraqi flight students. So, I took it. Why not? They offered me a good amount of money. And so, when the military tells you to go someplace, you just go there. But when a contractor offers you to go there, they're saying, hey, we'll pay you a bunch of money to go there, which is a lot different story. For those of you who were in the military and are now retired, you probably know that. I came back and, of course, went back to work as a DAC, finished out my career. Okay, I told myself I wasn't going to make this a long video, but here I am making it a long video. I guess I can't help myself. I like to talk. Maybe that's why I was an instructor for so long. So all this is just to put into perspective and tell my story about how this came about. So when they offered this deferred resignation, and I was already eligible to retire. I was planning on retiring at 62, but this would put me retiring a little bit early. At the time, they were offering a separation date, or for me it would have been a retirement date of September 30th. But then shortly after that, they said that we'll extend it to December 31st if that's your retirement date. So yeah, that prompted me to go ahead and take it. And one of the biggest factors in making that decision was absolutely health. I had to consider my health. I already was at 0 healthy lifespan hour or healthy years of lifespan. So that's something I had to really consider. And, it became a prime factor, more important than finances, more important than anything else. So I will say that for those of you who have to make this decision or have already made the decision, do not despair if you're thinking that you can't make it financially. Because as long as you have your health, you can do things to help you out financially. I'm not above becoming an Uber driver. I'm not above doing DoorDash. Whatever the case is, whatever I can do, I will make it happen. And I know that most people, especially those that come out of a military background, probably think the same way. You make the mission happen. That's important to understand. the way you're thinking about this. And I know that there's all kinds of financial planning gurus out there and retirement financial planners. And I'm not knocking any of those people because they're very professional and they know what they're doing. But I will say that one of the things that they don't consider is that health. To me, that is the most important thing of all. So keep this in mind. And let me ask you, what are your thoughts on this? Is health the most important thing for you, or does money overtake that? Because I can understand if you don't have money, you may not be able to afford health. Now, in my case, and in the case of those who also retired from the military, I'm under TRICARE Prime right now. I'll go under TRICARE for life when I turn 65. Until then, I pay for my health insurance, which is kind of strange, but that's the way it's worked out now. But that is something that a lot of people have to pay for. That in the military, of course, I had the advantage being retired, that I don't necessarily have to pay a lot of money for that. I mean, I'm paying as much for a year as some people are paying for some people are paying for an entire month. So my costs are really minimal when it comes to healthcare. Now, on the other side of the coin, my healthcare needs are becoming greater, quicker than most people would realize. And for those of you who worked in a factory or did a lot of repetitive work, you're probably feeling the same way. But for me anyway, that was not a primary consideration, and I know that there's a lot of others like me who feel the same way. But my big thing was, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to pay for this? So that is a big deal. But that being said, let me know. What do you feel about this? What was your most important decision process? What is the thing that made you decide, if you're in fact in this position, what is it that made you decide to go ahead and take this deal? If you're not in the military or working as a Department of the Army civilian or a civil servant of one kind or another, what is it that made you decide, or made you decide not to? Made you decide for or against this? I'd like to know, for my own research. Now, I know that this recent video here probably seems like it was just thrown together, and it's very closely related to all the other videos that I made. But I wanted to make sure that I spoke specifically about the health concept. I wanted to make sure that I asked you, all the viewers of this channel now, what are your thoughts? What is most important to you? For me, it was health, but I can understand if you're looking at the cost of health insurance. You have to have money to pay for that. So I just wanted to put this out and get your opinion on these things. I think it's important to consider these things in retirement. For me, that was the prime factor in choosing my retirement method. Until next time, see ya.